Sound speeds. And one of the things I enjoy doing in my spare time is going to YouTube and watching sound-related content. Sound familiar? And very similarly, I'm looking for information, but perhaps not the same kind of information as others, because one of the things as a content creator and a professional sound person that I'm trying to do here on YouTube is look for things that are not being covered. And I'm also trying to correct things that are.
First, hold the cable in your non-dominant hand, palm up, with the connector facing you.
2 seconds in and you're already wrong.
And the first step is to start with one end of the cable. I always just grab it with my right hand.
I love you, Tom, but don't teach him that way.
Now, I'm going to point my thumb the opposite way as I draw back and turn it. And this is under. See how it comes inside?
When I say wrong, I don't mean that there's no value to what these content creators are producing, nor do I mean that everything that you're doing is completely wrong, do it the opposite way. On the contrary. But remember back in school when you took a multiple choice test and your teacher gave you very specific instructions that said, pick the best answer. You may have picked a correct answer, but it wasn't the best one, so when it got graded, you were wrong. Hey, coil this cable up for me, okay? I can do that. Wrap this cable up and make sure it's easily manageable. Yeah, sure, I can do that. Here, watch this chain right here. Here's the most important reason why pros insist on you cable wrangling the right way. If I were to hold the cable in my left hand and cable wrangle to my left hand, notice the cable is going in a counterclockwise rotation. If I were to do this exact same movement now, but to my right hand, it's now being wrangled in a clockwise fashion. This is a problem because if I use a 100-foot cable, but I only need 50 feet, and I leave a coil on the ground, another pro who cable wrangles the wrong way can't pick up that cable and pick up where I left off. They're going to turn the cable into spaghetti unless, of course, they decide to rewrap the entire cable. One thing you can learn from those videos is that when you wrap a cable over under, it's adding a half twist when you go over and a half twist the other direction when you go under. So basically you're adding a half twist and then taking it away so that when you throw the cable out, it lays straight, as opposed to going over, 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 where it's adding a half twist with every turn, and when you throw it out, it turns into a bunch of kinks. Here's another interesting note for you. If I point this cable away from me, we've already talked about the fact that if I coil the right way, it is going in a counterclockwise rotation. But what if I were to do the same way that many people online do and point it towards me? Well, at this point, it's now wrapping in a clockwise fashion. So you may say, well, what if you're going not to your left hand in a clockwise rotation, but what if you reverse it and point it towards yourself going this way, and then you wrap it in a counterclockwise rotation? That's technically fine, but here's my thing. I want things to be a repeatable movement that doesn't waste energy or motion. And in order to do that, there's only one right way. Let's start out by talking about the cable wrangling technique that many people on YouTube champion, pointing the connector towards yourself. If I were to do a half a rotation one direction and a half a rotation the other way, let go of the cable, re-grab it in order to do it over and over again this exact same way, sure, it's a repeatable motion, but there's also a loss of control, and that's something we cannot do. Another thing that you will see people do is do a half coil one direction, and then let go of the cable, re-grab and twist up from the bottom. So you'll see this technique a whole lot too. And sure, that's the same kind of thing. It is a repeatable motion, but it's also a loss of control because you let go of the cable. That is different than the cable technique that professionals in the film industry use. Now, yes, other industries may do things differently, and that's fine. Here's the very easiest way for me to break down this technique for you. Square your shoulders up to me, first of all. Now, you see this cable? Right here at the end of the boot, where the cable begins. You're going to hold that with your thumb, and then lay your pointer finger directly on top of it to hold it right there. You don't want to hold it with your fingers like this, because now you have a loop there in your hand. You don't need that. Just lay it down on top. So now you're holding this with some extra length and flexibility with your fingers there. You say, I'm still holding this connector. It's not going anywhere. Now watch this. I'm going to bring this hand up and center it between my two shoulders with the cable connector pointed away from me. Lock this position. Do not move it. Now I've turned to the side, so that way you can see what I'm doing better. Now remember the way that I held the cable with your left hand? I'm going to grab the same exact way with my right hand underneath, and I'm going to slide my hand directly downwards. Straight down, my right arm is pointed toward the earth. The reason I'm doing that is because this is the length that my cable is going to be looped at. If I do it the exact same way with my hand going to the exact same place over and over again, it doesn't matter if it's today or a year from now, my cables are going to be the exact same loop size. It's not going to be like this. Like many people online, you see their loops are all over the place and very inconsistent, and you'll sometimes see little kinks and stuff in there too. Doing it this way, you're going to have the same loop size every single time. Thumb, pointer finger. I'm going to lock around the cable in this breakdown. Now watch this wrist technique right there. The wrist all the way over, right angle this way, and back as far as I can go the other way. Now, I'm going to slide my hand down with my wrist in that kind of weird right angle looking position. It's not exactly comfortable, but for our breakdown, it's going to do just fine. Now watch what happens if I were to lock my fingers and not twist with them. I'm going to now bring them straight up towards this other hand. Kind of have a weird looking cable kink, don't I? But watch what happens if I lay it on top of itself in order to make these two cables kind of kiss up at the top. Now it goes completely oval. Now I'm going to slide my hand down, exact same way as before, lock my fingers around the cable yet again, but this time I'm going to bring it back the other direction. So when I do that, I'm twisting my wrist from this position to this position, and watch what happens. As I bring my cable up, it now lays on top of itself. As I bring my hand, it kinks itself outwards. Watch. It brings itself outwards as I go up. See this? It's not going to be wanting me to twist it this way. It's going to naturally kink itself out. And by bringing my hands up together, I can now lay this on top of itself there. So that is the overall technique you're going to be doing. Now you may say, this is a little bit off. That's because I broke it down a couple of times and went up and down. But let me show you. If you were to do this now, again, but instead of twisting your wrist back and forth, you twist the cable in your fingers. Now slide down, lock in place, twist this way. Now I'm going to simply do a motion with the cable back and forth in my fingers like this. So step 2 would be sliding your hand down with just your fingertips. Now, as you bring it up, twist it half a twist one direction, and it's going to lay on top of itself. That would be a motion duplicating, kind of like what I did with my wrist a moment ago. But now I drop my hand back down, and I'm going to bring my hand up again, but this time I'm going to twist the opposite direction so that now the cable wants to flip around on the outside of my hand. As I bring it up again, same exact thing. Now look at that size. That's a repeatable motion, and one that allows you to maintain control of the cable at all times because your right hand never leaves the cable. In addition to the coils being the exact same size every single time you do it, it makes it very easy for you to casually start to do this and not even pay attention to what you're doing because it's muscle memory. It's going to become one with you as you do this technique. Look at these cables. So if I'm doing this technique over and over again, I don't have to pay attention. As a matter of fact, with a repeatable technique like this, it allows you to also quickly identify any kinks in this cable. If I were to twist this thing up a few times and slide my hand down, well, that didn't kink it at all. Let's really mess it up. I'm going to twist this thing way out of alignment. And now as I start to cable up, oh, look at that, already it's kinked itself. But if I start to bring my hand up and it feels awkward, I'm going to recognize it real instantly and say, okay, let's get this thing back fixed. And that one's now really bad because I really did a number on this. Look at this thing. Okay, so in order for me to correct this, I can now look at it and say, that's being twisted this way, that's being twisted this other way, and I'm going to easily be able to identify where the kinks are in this cable and to correct the twist in it simply because I'm not really going to be doing anything other than now paying attention to this motion that my hands are doing. If it falls out of that muscle memory, that's not going to be good. I'm gonna have to correct it and get it back in alignment so that way the muscle memory is now happy and consistent again. Now it is. All these loops are now the exact same. I mean, more or less, right? There's no kinks though. But one other thing you're going to run into is that it starts to hurt your hands over the course of time, especially if you do a fast cable wrangle. As a matter of fact, if you look at a video I did online about 6 years ago at the time of this video, I recently had won a cable wrangling competition by a factor of like 2. I was twice as fast as the person that came in second. And I kept having people after that challenge me in person saying, well, I can out cable you. I'm like, look, I'm sure I'm not the fastest person in the world. And if you can, fine, more power to you. But one thing that I did not want to have is people challenge me and then have nowhere near the speed that I do. So I made a video where I wrapped a 100-foot XLR cable in 16 seconds and I demonstrated this on video. No cable techniques, tricks, or anything like that. Just simply the technique I just showed you. But one thing it does do is it generates a lot of friction. So it can start to burn your hands real quickly if you do it too fast. And I don't want to burn my hands too much as I'm doing this. So I felt that off as I was talking to you, so let's correct that. So what I'm doing now is correcting that cable kink. It's probably still messed up from where I did it before. And so sometimes you need to actually do a cable a couple times in order to fix the kinks in it. But my point here is that I simply did a repeatable movement where I did not remove my hand from the cable at any time. And by doing something like that, you're able to repeatedly do this same exact technique and make perfect coils every single time. Now, the trick, of course, is to do that muscle memory, to make that a habit. Another advantage of this technique is it allows you to manage your connectors correctly. This is the connector I started with. This is the connector I ended with. We know this is one big spiral as it goes through this entire cable. So what I want to do with my cable, this is here a rip tie, I'm simply going to loop it around here, and instead of just doing a light little grab of the cable where there's a whole lot of movement in there, that would allow the connectors to move around. I don't want to do that. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the connector where this cable, where it's connected to the cable, very taut right there, and I'm going to put tension on it and then connect it up. That's going to make sure that when I grab this cable next time, no matter what I've done to this thing, the cable, if I simply grab it right here at this rip tie, the cables are still in the exact same place with regards to the connector on this end and the connector on this end. I'm rewrapping a 25-foot cable where the loops are a little bit smaller. Now, the reason I'm doing this is because I'm going to show you what happens if you don't manage your ends correctly, as opposed to going straight out where I can throw this cable and it goes out in a straight line, which now I'll have to recable this thing. Just to show you though, it shouldn't take very long. Now, if I were to do this exact same thing now, but now with this connector, I'm going to toss through there, not managing it correctly. Watch what happens. Loop, 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 loop. We hate this, and this is the reason why I didn't use the 100-footer to demonstrate this. So hopefully this has given you some insight as to how professionals in the film industry over/under wrap their cable and why. Thank you for tuning in this episode of Sound Speeds. Be sure to tune in the future for more tips, tricks, and professionals' ways of doing things that will keep you from getting lectured if you ever end up working with me, and sound advice. Have a question you'd like answered or want to add something? Be sure to write it in the comment section down below. You can also make a suggestion for future topics of discussion. Again, comment section down below, or you can email me at soundspeeds@yahoo.com. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss out on future sound advice.